Welcome to episode 82 of the Super Parent Syndrome, and I am your host, Dr. Nick Fanning. Today we're going to be talking about the A student. Sit back and relax. Let's get started.
Parenting in the 21st century is ever evolving, and while you balance work, kids, and your sanity, it's easy to feel discouraged. Welcome to the Super Parent Syndrome with your host, Dr. Nick Fanning.
That's right, folks, the A student. So here's the thing. I was reading Robert Kiyosaki's book, The Cash Flow Quadrant, and he went on a little charade talking about how the educated or the A student has been conditioned to not make mistakes. In fact, by definition, being an A student just means that you've made less mistakes in testing. And so we've been conditioned this way, and the problem becomes this. Because we are A students, we have a fear. And this fear holds us back. Now, by reading this, man, that struck a chord because I've always been an A student. You know, I've did well, top 10 in high school, in college, unless I had one bad semester that was incredibly terrible. But the rest, I was an A student that didn't have to really work that hard. Even in chiropractic school, it was a lot of work, but at the same time, learning just came easy to me to rote memorization and going forward. Now, here's the thing: being an A student as a doctor. That's pretty critically important. You don't want to make mistakes. You want to make sure that you're minimizing risk and that you're doing the right thing. Doctor, medical doctor, chiropractor, doesn't matter. A students, doctors. Now, here's the thing. That's great when you're an employee, but when you are an entrepreneur, you're running your own business, you're trying to figure out your marketing plan, you try to figure out sales, you try to figure out training employees, staffing, purchasing, doing taxes, all these things do start to require more of a risk, or to basically trial and error different ways, different streams to make sure that you do the best you possibly can to your market. And what that means is that those that are willing to fail, those that are willing to risk, are often the ones that do the best. Okay, they're not the ones that are afraid to look silly by introducing themselves to random people. They're not the ones that are afraid to look silly doing a podcast or doing a Facebook Live to educate the masses. They're not the ones that are afraid to have those conversations with people, to sell them on something, to close them on, to create clarity, whatever that conversation might be. They'd have no fear with that. Okay, and exactly, when you're working with a medical professional, you don't want to be sold on it. You just want to be told the facts, and they'll let somebody else handle the rest of the details. But here's the same thing. Sometimes I have to wear both hats. And that's where it gets a little tough. And so when I read this quote, when I read this chapter in his book, man, it struck hard, because that's what I really felt. That was what had been holding me back until I started leaping forward and trying to expand, do a podcast, do these things well, to experience with you guys what it does take to have risk, but also to risk it all, to risk reputation, to talk about scary things and not so scary things, but at the same time, still just talking to the masses. And so here's the thing there. Where in your life are you holding back because of fear? A fear of being wrong, or fear of looking silly or looking wrong? Because guess what? Here's the thing. Leaders, in any capacity, leaders are going to take criticism. Leaders are going to have people telling them their own feedback about how they're wrong. Yes, you're going to have accolades of people telling you how amazing it is and how great it is, but you're also going to have the other side of a bit, like, man, you have no idea what you're talking about, or, man, you might be really great for this 90%, but this 10% you didn't even pay attention to, and therefore you're kind of a jackass. So the thing is that those that are willing to risk it are also the ones that are willing to win. And I have to tell you this, is that when we, A students or whoever you are that's kind of fear of risking it, we only seem to think about the worst case scenario. Scenarios that probably won't even happen. And if they do happen, they're not going to be that serious. So here's the thing, even if as I'm doing this podcast, as I'm doing these Facebook Lives, I have haters, okay? And these haters, sometimes are founded, they have foundational, hey, that's a good point. But most often, like 99.9% of the time, they're just trying to get a rile out of somebody, whether it's my audience or myself. And so it just comes down to a quick delete, block, and moving on. Because, hey, I'm not meant to serve everybody. And I'm certainly not meant to serve those haters. So here's the thing. How can you apply this to your own life? It might be having those difficult conversations even with your children, teenage children in particular. It might be having that conversation with your boss or your team. Might have to expose the fact that, hey, I'm not sure exactly how to do this. How can you help me? Or, hey, I have this idea. What can we do to leap with it? Because I can tell you this, that fear kills more dreams than anything else. It's just that fear of the unknown, the fear of looking dumb. It just kills dreams left and right. And if you could drop that, if you can instead embrace failure, like Thomas Edison did, where, he spent over 1,000 different attempts to make the light bulb. And when they ask him, when a reporter asked him, like, hey, what was it like failing 1,000 times? He's like, no, I just learned 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. But, I eventually learned it. And to look at those experimentation and that opportunity to actually for more growth and to actually learn. And if you apply that to your own life, to your own situations, imagine how faster and more boldly you would go. To know that failing is part of the process. That if you want to start a new business, maybe it's an MLM, maybe it's an actual storefront, maybe it's a service, but if you actually took the leap and did it and realized up front, I'm going to fail. And in fact, the faster and harder I fail, the easier, well, not easier, but the faster that success will come too. So I might as well get them done and over with it. To fall on your face. Because here's the thing. Think about learning to walk. Think about learning to talk. These things took lots of failure. As a baby, you can just watch them fall over and over and over again. And they get frustrated, they cry, but they still get back up and they try again. So where are you going to get right back up and try again? This is your message for today. It's Dr. Nick Fanning, and I'm signing off.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Super Parent Syndrome. Please be sure to visit peptalksforparents.com for more content and our free newsletter. And remember, you are not alone.